So let's go over what we covered in this module. Well, we went through and we talked about what a generic is, which is basically just a way of writing some code that's independent of a type. And we found out that we could do this in a class and we could do this in a method. So I showed you how we could create a generic class, and we created a generic class so that we could specify what type we wanted to use and reuse that class for a whole bunch of different types. Then we went through and we did the same thing and created a generic method, a method that could be used and operate on multiple kinds of types. And then I showed you some examples of bounded generics. We learned that bounded generic is a way to restrict your generic so that whatever type is being passed into that generic method or that generic class has to extend or implement a certain interface or class. Then we looked at the special case of wildcards in generics, and this is one of the more complicated features that exists in Java for generics, and we talked about how you could use a wildcard to represent almost a generic type, a type that would either represent a whole class of types, any types of generics that would inherit from whatever the type is, or any classes that were a parent of whatever the type is. And then finally we talked about how generics are implemented in Java, that they use type erasure, which is basically means that when the code is compiled, the generics are gone. They disappear from the code. And I gave you a little bit of caution that you should remember this when using generics in Java, and to basically just think about when this code's compiled, if the type changed to object, would the code that I'm writing work? Because that's what's going to happen when your code is compiled. So that's the end of this course on Java fundamentals. You should now have a pretty good understanding of the basics of Java. And the second part of this course, in the second course on Java, we're going to cover some more advanced topics that are still fairly basic, but will help expand some of the usage of Java. But at this point, you can pretty much understand Java code and should be able to write Java code that is able to accomplish some simple goals. And we've really covered most of the language features that exist in Java, or at least most of the basic ones that you'll use on a day-to-day basis. Well, thanks for joining me on this course, and I hope that you've learned a lot about Java.